I remember resin-sweet smoke and pine rime cold the night they came for me, the night the world decided I would belong to a crown. Firelight leapt along the timber palisade in Frost Hollow, throwing long, nervous shadows that made even the elders look like strangers. Everyone who mattered was gathered at the central green. Everyone except me. I was tucked in our root cellar beneath sacks of dried berries and bundles of sage, palms damp around a small amulet shaped like a wolf's eye. My grandmother's charm, pressed on me with the same whispered prayer every full moon, in darkness, keep your own light. Mira! My mother breathed over the slats, voice ironed flat with fear. Whatever you hear, don't come out. I wanted to promise. The word snagged, small and useless, in my throat. I am Omega, rare in our scattered hill pack, wrapped in good intentions until the wrappings felt like bindings. People said Omegas are precious. Precious things are hidden. Hidden things learn to make themselves smaller still. Drums began beyond the palisade, 3 slow beats, 3 quick, again and again, announcing the choosing. Every 7 winters the Alpha King of the Northlands sent his envoys to take scent samples and offer names to the crown. An honor, the notice had said. A duty. Every girl in Frost Hollow read the ink and pretended not to measure her own heartbeat against the idea of a fate decided far from home. The drums broke off like a thread snapped by teeth. Howls rolled across the trees, signal of selection. Relief broke through my ribs, bright and brief. Then my mother's keening rose above the pack's murmurs. Boots pounded the steps. The hatch jerked wide and torch wash poured down, painting the cellar gold and fear white. 3 royal sentinels filled the opening, steel-caped cloaks hooding their faces. Mira of Frost Hollow, the middle one said, voice as even as a river stone. By the will of the Northlands and the right of the crown, you have been scented and selected for presentation to King Kale. The name hit like winter water. Kale, Alpha King, Lycan of the high passes. The wolf whose victories sounded like storms. My lips shaped there's a mistake and made no sound at all. You have 10 minutes, the sentinel added softer. Take what matters. What mattered fit inside my pocket, a wolf's eye amulet and a folded scrap of paper, my grandmother's last note, worn smooth from being read too many nights. I pressed my forehead to my mother's, breathed lavender and salt and stubbornness. I'll come back. I lied for both of us, and followed the king's men into the winter dark. The royal carriage smelled of cold leather and smoke. We left Frost Hollow at moonrise and threaded north along a road the pack maps named only in warnings. Mountains shouldered higher each day until the sky felt like a lid. I slept badly and ate worse. When the horses were watered on the 6th night, a woman with warm, weathered hands brought me broth and a blanket and the first unguarded kindness I'd felt since the hatch opened. Bryn, she said, tucking the blanket around my knees without waiting for permission. I keep sharp things away from princes and teach puppies to mind. Also, I look after girls with eyes like thunder. I don't. I began. You do. She sat on a fallen birch and stirred the coals. Being chosen isn't a death sentence. It isn't life either, I said, surprising myself. Words came easier in firelight. Not one I picked. Bryn's mouth tugged. Maybe not. But I've served at Winterkeep 15 years. Kale is not the monster border tales make him. He is an alpha who learned mercy the hard way, and he guards what's his like the last heat of a dying fire. I am not his, I said too quickly. Noted. She raised her brows. He will not force a bond. He's sent every would-be bride home these past 3 choosings. The council's patience, however, is a thin ice lake, the kind that looks pretty right before it cracks. She left me nursing heat between my hands and thoughts I did not want. We reached Winterkeep at gray noon, a fortress carved into a glacier's blue heart, all facets and light. Banners snapped high. The gate mouth swallowed us and turned to galleries, to corridors veined with luminous crystal, to a chamber stocked with steam and towels and women who knew how to unfasten a life in minutes. They scrubbed road grit from my skin and set midnight cloth across my shoulders, dark as a raven's wing. They braided my hair with silver thread. I stared at the mirror until the girl inside it looked like a story told about someone braver. The king will receive you at dusk, Bryn said, fastening a moon-slice clasp at my throat. He asked for privacy? He asked? My voice sounded small. Omegas were arranged, escorted, presented. Asking felt like the first breath after a long dunking. He asked? Bryn confirmed. Be honest, Mira. Alphas have a dozen senses. Truth is the only scent that doesn't sour by morning. The doors to the king's study were carved with the phases of the moon and the runes of the first pact. The room beyond was less throne and more work, maps pinned with obsidian markers, shelves thick with ledgers and histories, a wide hearth where a wolf pelt lay, with no head attached, thank the old gods. A man stood with his back to me, tall enough to make the fire look smaller. Your Majesty, said the guard at my shoulder. Mira of Frost Hollow. Silence held for 3 heartbeats. Leave us, the king said, and the words thrummed in my sternum like a struck drum. He turned. I had expected a legend in iron. I found a man who had been young too long, eyes like stormlight, mouth shaped more by restraint than by smiles. Scars laddered his knuckles. A ring of ironwood circled his thumb, old, simple, worn smooth by worry. Rise, he said gently, and only then did I realize I'd fallen to my knees on instinct alone. I rose. My gaze stayed fixed on an ink stain on the carpet until the smallest command in his voice pulled me up again. Look at me! My Omega nature answered before my mind could, head up, breast stalled, everything inside me reaching and bracing at once. The air shifted. He breathed in, slow, like tasting winter on the first day it arrives. Your scent, he said, more observation than compliment, is clearer here than on the envoy's cloth. The slightest hitch, almost a laugh at himself for saying it out loud. I am Kale. I nodded because words had scattered. Are you afraid of me, Mira of Frost Hollow? He asked. Yes, I said, because Bryn had told me to carry truth like a banner. Good, he murmured. Fear keeps the unwary from cliff edges. He poured wine the color of garnets and handed me a cup. His knuckles brushed mine, my pulse tripped. Do you know why you're here? Selected, I managed. Presented. To the king. To a man, he corrected softly. A king is a duty. A man is a person inside it. We will begin there. Ask me anything you wish. So I did. About the maps. The sentinels. The winter roads. About why he had rejected 3 rounds of neatly groomed futures and kept a kingdom waiting. He answered every question without heat. When he asked about my childhood, I reached for the walled gardens inside me and found iron hinges rusted by disuse. You're hiding, he said, not harshly, but with the unarguable certainty of an alpha who can smell a lie without needing to name it. His voice roughened, a growl pulled thin. Don't hide from me, Omega. The words were not threat but vow, and something unknotted in my chest. Protected, is what Frost Hollow called what they did to me. The word had tasted like honey and sat in my stomach like a stone. Sheltered to suffocation, I told him by the hearth, fingers skating the rim of the cup to keep them from trembling. Kept inside when the pack ran the ridge. Kept obedient while the boys learned to track and the girls learned to barter. Always stay, Mira. Always wait. His eyes, stormlight shaded, not silver, didn't look away. Because you are Omega. Because they were afraid of what the world would take, I said. And because fear loves a cage. What do you want? He asked, and it sank into me that no one had ever asked that question without already arranging the answer they preferred. To belong, I said, and the truth of it hurt. To be useful. To be seen as more than a womb in a soft dress. Kale stood, tension skating his shoulders like lightning without a strike. I became king at 15, he said. My father died the same morning as the brother who was supposed to lead. I learned law from men who wanted my leash short and my teeth closed. I know cages other men do not. Then why bring me to one? Because a keep becomes a cage only when the one inside has no keys, he said, and there was the ghost of a smile. Bryn tells me you like keys. I startled, then laughed despite myself. The sound changed the room. He set his cup down. Walk with me tomorrow, he said. Walls are truer once you see what they were built to guard. When Bryn saw my face after, she squeezed my hands until my knuckles cracked. Good, she said. You still have a voice. Keep it. I slept not at all and dreamed in the gaps, of glacier windows, of wolves pacing light across the floor, of a king who said don't hide and meant come out where I can protect you without taking you from yourself. The morning bit like mint. In the stables, a roan gelding tossed his mane and eyed me with the same wary interest I had for him. Ash, the stablemaster said. He won't toss you unless you deserve it. Across the aisle, a great black stallion stamped once and went very still. The king's palm slid along its neck like a promise. Nightfall, Cale said. He knows every drift and switchback between here and the border. We rode with 2 sentinels shadow far behind. Winterkeep unfurled beneath us, a city tucked into a mountainside like a secret, smoke rising blue from vents carved in stone, market flags bright as berries. Beyond the last terrace the world opened, fur to the horizon, rivers flashing like quicksilver in ravines, the sky so clean it made my lungs ache. You love it, I said before I could stop the words. I serve it, he answered, and then, quieter, and yes. He knew the names of the woodcutters we passed, and the widow who sold cedar shavings by the sack, and the boy with 2 missing front teeth who shouted Your Majesty. As if it were a joke they'd made together. The king as alpha, not simply ruler, a man who could lift a log with a poor shoulder and also sign a treaty that kept 3 villages fed through a deep freeze. At a ridge where the world fell away like a cut, he swung down and came to my stirrup with a question in his palm. May I? The way he asked, permission, not presumption, felt like a warm hand on a frozen door latch. I nodded. He lifted me like I weighed the same as breath. What threads bind you? He asked, fingers easing away too slowly to be accident. Duty, I said. Loyalty. Fear of disappointing both. And to me? I don't know, I whispered, because it was the nearest thing to safe. He took me to a place where steam scribbled the air above a bowl of water so blue it might have stolen the sky's color when no one was looking. The first vow was sworn here, he said softly. Wolf to mountain. Alpha to pack. King to people. Do you believe in old words? I believe we are made by the promises we keep, he said, eyes gone storm brighter. And undone by those we break. When the signal horn called us back, the world we returned to had shifted. Men moved like smoke in a wind. Bryn met us at the gate with her mouth ablade. Lord Vesper of the southern marches, she snapped. And his daughter, Cassia. The king's face closed like a gauntlet. Winterkeep's great hall was a cathedral of ice lit by fire, crystal spires, banners like midnight, 1,000 candle flames mirrored 1,000 times. At the high table, Cale's seat sat between duty and danger, Elder Mara of the council to one side, Lord Vesper to the other, all elegant cruelty wrapped in civility. Cassia sat beneath a tower of onyx hairpins, beauty sharp enough to draw blood if you looked too long. Gabriel, the king's adviser, found me at the edge of the crowd and offered his arm without waiting to be asked. Amber eyes, quick smile, the coiled patience of a man who listened more than he spoke. You caused a stir, Mira, he murmured. The king does not commonly invite a potential to sit near judgment. I did not ask. You didn't refuse either. He sounded pleased. Good, Cale signaled. A space cleared 2 places to his left. I walked there the way you cross new ice, light-footed, alive to every creak. Vesper's gaze slid to me like oil. Frost Hollow, he said as if tasting something sour. A provincial pack. Curious selection. Curious? The king said mildly. Shadow packs endure what border lords only read about. I value endurance. Cassia's smile was a lesson in poison. Of course, your majesty. Strong blood will be required for heirs. Strength isn't always in the obvious places, I heard myself say, voice steadier than my pulse. Sometimes it's where a pack remembers to circle back for its slowest. Silence took a breath. Kale lifted his cup a half-inch in my direction and took the slowest sip I had ever seen. Dinner became strategy set to music. Trade routes. Border skirmishes. A rumor that the southern marches had trained human hunters to track Lycans by ash and salt. Through it all I felt watched. Not just by Vesper and Kasha, but by the keep itself, Old Stone taking notes. When the musician started a reel, the king rose and walked straight to me. A hush fell, audible as snow. He rarely danced, Bryn had said. He never danced first. Will you? He asked. My fingers found his. Warmth jumped between us like a spark that had been trying to catch since the door first opened. Everyone is staring, I whispered. Let them witness, he said, and drew me into motion. He moved with lethal grace, but there was gentleness at the edges, room for a partner to breathe. You spoke cleanly to wolves who use words like snares, he murmured. I spoke without thinking. Sometimes that's where the truest answer waits. When the dance ended, Gabriel took my hand with court-perfect courtesy and spun me through a gentler measure. He is different with you, he said, not looking at me, which felt like another courtesy. He watches as if the sun has come back after too long a winter. I tried to laugh. It came out honest instead. I don't understand why I am here. Resonance, Gabriel said simply. The part in you that steadies the wolf in him, and the part in him that calls the courage in you to wake. I had almost reached the corridor to my rooms when Kasha stepped from an alcove, gown the color of old blood, smile like a knife. A word, she said sweetly. Bryn tensed behind me. I lifted a hand. I could stand in my own storm. You don't belong, Kasha murmured, keeping her mouth smiling so onlookers would see only charm. Border pack omegas are useful for one thing. The throne requires more. The throne requires a king who chooses for the kingdom, I said. Exactly, she purred. And he will choose me. He always returns to the correct answer in the end. Save yourself humiliation. Leave now. I can make it comfortable. For an instant the girl who hid pushed at my ribs, asking to be let back in. Then the king's growl, don't hide from me, rumbled through my bones like remembered thunder. No, I said, pleasant as frost. I'll stay until the king dismisses me. Her hand caught my wrist. Her grip surprised me. You're making an enemy. You were aiming for that from the moment I breathed your air, I said softly. I lowered my gaze to her fingers, then raised it to her face. Let go. She did. Not because she wanted to, but because somewhere in the keep stone an old law still lived, and even Kasha wasn't eager to test it tonight. This isn't over, she said. It never is, I said, and returned to my chambers with my spine intact. A parcel waited on the table, a small silver wolf with amber flecks for eyes, heavy in the palm, and a note written in hand neat enough to serve as a standard. For courage shown. Rest. Tomorrow asks more. Sleep came in fits. When morning finally found me, Bryn stood by the window, mouth set. The council wants you, she said. They will look for cracks. Let them, I said, and hoped my voice made it all the way to my feet. The council chamber was a circle carved straight from the glacier, walls alive with trapped light. 7 chairs faced a single stone seat, mine. Elder Mera presided, hair the color of hoarfrost braided with gold wire, eyes sharp as mountain air. To her right sat Councillor Hadine, thin as a spear, to her left the keeper of ledgers, a woman whose gaze measured and weighed and measured again. Mira of Frost Hollow, Mera said. We are caretakers of the Northlands, and the king's patience with the choosing has thinned to transparency. Convince us you are not another delay. I cannot promise what is the king's to choose, I said. I can speak only for what I bring. And that is? Hadine asked, with the air of a man preparing to dismiss an answer he had already decided to dislike. Honesty, I said. A clean view of the ground common wolves walk. A way of listening that belongs to omegas, of feeling where a pack is fraying before it breaks. I don't know if that makes a queen. I do know it strengthens an alpha and steadies a king. Silence stretched, not hostile, considering. Pretty words, Hadine said at last. Useful ones, if you're cold enough to try them, I said mildly, and caught the tiny lift of Mara's mouth. What do you know of Kale? Mara asked, voice gentler. That he became king too young and made being king into a second skin anyway. That he loves this land enough to wear grooves in the floor at night when the winter stores run thin. That he guards with ferocity and chooses with restraint. That he is lonely. I finished, surprised at the word that had come to stand in the doorway of my mouth and refused to move. Something softened in the old woman's gaze. And why are you here? She asked. Not why you were brought. Why you stay. Because I am being seen, I thought, and said it out loud, because I had promised myself I would. Because every life before this was smaller than I am. Because I want to learn if being Omega is a compass, not a cage. Mara nodded once. Thank you. Outside, the corridor smelled wrong. Gabriel found me before my breath could find me. With me, he said, all amber eyes and angles. We cut through 2 galleries and a storeroom that smelled of beeswax and oil to a door guarded by wolves in gray steel. The air inside the training hall was hot with effort and sand and something that lived between them. Kale moved at the center of the ring like a storm drawing itself down to one point. Bare to the waist, scars like rigging lines over muscle, he carved air with a blade until the air looked grateful to have been shaped. He did not see me. He felt me, or felt the change my presence made, and let the points sink into sand. There was an attempt, he said without preface. The voice he used to announce winter. My mouth went dry. On me? He nodded once. Poison in the basin. Enough to stop a heart after the first shock. His eyes were silvered at the edges now. The wolf was close. Who? I asked, and it came out a sound that barely remembered how to be a word. We're hunting scent and signatures, Gabriel said. Kale stepped close, heat from his skin undoing the last illusion that this danger could be understood at a polite distance. You stay with me, he said, voice roughened to a growl without teeth. Or with Gabriel. No corridors alone. No water you didn't see poured. No food without Bryn's hands on it first. I am not yours, I said, low and even, because it was the line I thought I had to draw to stay myself. Not yet, he said, and something like humor cracked the ice at the edge of his mouth. He brushed a thumb across my temple as if he couldn't quite stop himself. But you are under my protection. No one touches what I protect and breathes easy after. He pulled himself back a step with visible effort, leashed the wolf, and turned the promise into orders. Guards doubled. Routes changed. Bryn moved my belongings to a suite that shared a small sitting room with the king's. Wise? I asked Gabriel as we walked. Or war? Both, he said. Vesper brought weather with him. I'd rather meet it where I can pick the ground. That night sleep came like a truce. I woke before dawn to find Kale at the window, outline cut from early light. Today the choosing must finish, he said. The council requires it. And what do you require? I asked. His jaw worked once, then stilled. A partner, he said simply. Alpha to Omega. King to queen. Man to woman. Not a mirror, not a chain. Someone who will say no when I forget how. I did not answer with words. I reached for the wolf eye amulet at my throat and held it until the metal warmed. The choosing took place where the mountain breathed, a grove ringed by hot springs, steam lifting candles into stars. Elder Mara stood at the head of a great circle of wolves ranked by rank and patience. 3 of us waited at the far arc, Lycan from the eastern slopes, quiet as snowfall, Kasha, all razors hidden under silk, and me, Mara from Frost Hollow, fingers wrapped around a small silver wolf given by a man who did not give lightly. A horn spoke the ancient note. The king entered not as a jeweled sovereign but as an alpha, the furred mantle, the leather guard, the ironwood ring dark on his thumb. He bowed to Lycan with respect and released her with gratitude. She had been willing. He turned to Kasha and made, politely and publicly, an ending he had refused 3 times in private. Vesper's mouth did not move. His eyes promised winter. Then Kale crossed to me. He did not lift his hand like an order. He opened it like a door. "Mirror of Frost Hollow," he said, and the growl lived warm in the lowest part of my name. "I ask for partnership, not obedience, for truth, not prettied words, for a queen who will stand beside the king and steady the wolf when he would rather bite." Steam beaded my lashes. Something inside me, something that had stayed very small for a very long time, stood up. "I won't hide," I said, voice carrying farther than I meant it to. "Not from you. Not from myself. Not from what the Northlands ask." He smiled then, not the knife-thin shift of mouth I'd seen in council, but the sudden bright change that makes a storm break. Our foreheads touched. Elder Mara bound our hands with cord twined silver and gold. The gathered wolves lifted their voices until the grove itself answered back. Later, when the candles burned low and the keep had a new story to tell itself, we stood on the balcony of the royal wing and watched frost smoke the air. "Vesper won't forgive being told no," I said. "He can choke on it," Kale said, but there was no gloating in the words, only the level promise of a man who understood the price of a boundary. His thumb traced the place the cord had rested. "There will be storms. I grew up where the wind teaches you to lean," I said. He huffed the softest laugh. "Together, Omega. Together, King," I said, and let the night carry the vow wherever it needed to go. Morning after the choosing tasted like metal and promise. The royal wing woke early. Boots in corridors, low-voice briefings, after a night when half the keep had pretended not to hear 1,000 gossiping hearts. Bryn brought bread still steaming and a pot of dark coffee that could resurrect the dead. "Eat," she ordered. "Queen's fainting is for plays, not palaces." "Queen," I repeated, testing the word in my mouth like a pebble I might keep. The cord print still warmed my wrist, a ghost of silver and gold. Beyond the window, winter keep shone frost pale, banners bright as berries against glacier glass. Gabriel arrived with maps under his arm and that easy not smile he wore when trouble had put on a new coat. "We followed the poison's trail," he said without prelude. "It leads into Vesper's quarter and then, conveniently, disappears into an ash bin bound for the furnaces. Neat endings hide messy beginnings," Kale said, joining us, the Alpha King in a simple black shirt, hair damp from a brisk scrub. He smelled of mint and smoke and the snow that lives forever in ledges. His eyes were human gray this morning. The wolf watched from the edges, patient. "Will not accuse without proof." "And if proof stays hidden?" I asked. "Then we will make it inconvenient to keep hiding," Gabriel said. He spread a parchment. "The southern marches are quiet at the borders and loud in the courts. So we'll turn loud to quiet and quiet to loud." Kale tapped a valley cut by river, shaped like a cupped hand. "Waymeet," he said. "Neutral ground. The harvest accords are due. Vesper must send a party to bargain for winter grains. We'll host early, invite every alpha within 3 days' ride, and discuss supply lines where witnesses are plentiful. And while they talk, we watch who leans toward which shadows," Gabriel finished. Bryn snorted. "Talk pretty for trap with extra steps." I looked from map to man. "What do you need of me?" Kale's attention settled, steady as a hand on the back. "The work of an Omega Queen, if you're willing to begin it. Sit in the listening tent. Weigh the currents. Tell me where the pack fabric thins." I felt the old ache, "Let me belong," and nodded. "I'll try." "Not try," he said, a hint of the growl sliding through, not a correction but a blessing. "Duel." Waymeet lay where 3 old roads crossed, one from the ice fields, one from the red soil south, one from the human towns that bartered iron nails for winter pelts. We rode with a lean escort, banners furled to keep rumor from outrunning us, and made camp in a meadow ringed with birch. The king's pavilion rose like a moon, simple and impossible to ignore. A smaller tent stood beside it with open sides and thick rugs, the listening place Bryn called my den. "An Omega den should smell like safety," Bryn said, hands busy with cedar shavings, pine resin, a kettle of water that hissed sweet smoke. "Let them breathe here, and you'll hear the truth they can't say in the big tent." Kale's council went up in orderly chaos. Some tables with ledgers, casks under canvas, a table where Elder Mara's aide built little mountains out of inked river stones. I watched the lines bind themselves, and for the first time the kingdom felt like more than a map. It felt like a living beast with many hearts. By noon, alphas arrived in singles and pairs, bringing cold and color. Red veils lowered in a russet cloak. The cliff pack alpha with a laugh like falling rock. Vesper, last, with Kasha beside him and smiles so polished they reflected the sky. He bowed the exact degree required to avoid insult, and no more. "Waymeet honors the law," Kale said, and for the crowd he was crowned sure and calm as a lake with a storm waiting under it. "Grain for passes. Salt for pelts. Help where winter hits faster than our lists." I took my place in the den. They came not in rank but in need. A river pack beta whose mate had vanished between barter post and bridge, voice thinned by worry. A blacksmith from the human town whose son had presented Omega. He wanted to know how to keep the boy safe and proud in a place that didn't yet have words for such things. A young alpha who spoke too fast about border flares until his hands told the truth. Trembling, he kept shoving into his belt. I listened. Asked small, steady questions. Let silence do the work talking cannot. The air filled with threads. This alpha's bravado tugged toward Vesper's camp. That beta's anger knotted around a petty feud that could starve two valleys come deep winter. Every story left a shape behind. When Kale ducked into the den at dusk, snow on his mantle, I handed him the shapes. "The river beta's mate didn't leave," I said. "She was taken. He won't say it in the big tent because the man he suspects is his brother's alpha." "Names?" I shook my head. "Not yet. He needs room to stand up first." Kale's gaze moved over the den, the cedar, the rugs, the kettle, me. "You've made a place where wolves can be weak without breaking," he said, so soft I barely heard. "Not weak," I answered. "Unhidden." His mouth curved. "Better word." Trouble walked in on two legs wearing a trader's smile and a cloak stitched with gold that didn't belong to the kind of man who carried it. He brought a wagon of salt blocks with a false bottom, and under it, glass vials wrapped in leather, marked with a sigil I had seen melted into a pool of poison back at Winterkeep. Bryn found the vials first, because Bryn could smell a lie 3 tents away. She piled them on Kale's table and folded her arms. "Your move, Alpha King." "Not here," Mara warned. "Waymeet holds because it is not sullied by spectacle." Kale looked at me. "Speak with the traitor in the den," I said. "Give him a place to decide which future is least likely to crack his bones." It was risk and mercy both. The man, Corin, from a saltworks south of Vesper's lands, sat where the cedar smoke curled and stared at his mud-stained hands like they might open and tell him which choice would cost less. I poured water and said nothing. Silence filled with truth faster than questions did. "I take orders," he began eventually. "I don't ask where they lead." "That's another way to say I pretend not to know," I said, not unkindly. He flinched. "The vials were meant for no one," he said too quickly. "A message. To be found." "Found by whom?" Kale asked. Corin looked up then and truly saw the man across from him. He swallowed. "By you, your majesty." "Speak it clean," Kale said, and there was no fury in it. Only an alpha asking a lesser wolf to be brave a heartbeat longer. "Vesper sent for poisoners from the human cities," Corin whispered. "He told them the court feasts needed seasoning that hurts slow. He said if I asked questions I'd feed my boys salt until their tongues split." His hands shook. He clutched them into stillness. "Kasha paid me. Said a queen is weakest in celebration. Said no one weeps over an Omega the way they do over a king." Bryn's breath went through her teeth like a knife going home. Kale did not move. The stillness was back, the kind that means a storm has made up its mind. "Where?" he asked. Corin told us names the wind had carried half-heard. A storehouse with red doors. A back road through birch stands. A crest sewn into cloak hems, crow and crown, Vesper's old boast. We can take it to open council, Gabriel said. Or we can cut it out tonight while it still believes itself clever. Cale's gaze came to me. Not for permission, he was king. But for balance. Truth and light, I said. Safety and shadow. Do both. Show the proof at the dawn assembly after you've taken the tools out of their hands. Done, he said. Bryn with me. Gabriel, choose 6 you trust like your own teeth. Mira. I will stay in the den, I said, because part of me wanted to say with you, into the dark, and another part, the new queen part, knew a steadied hearth saves as many lives as a drawn blade. Good, he said, and the word tasted like thank you. Night turned Waymeet into a black lake with tents for islands. I sat in the den with the kettle refilled and the cedar smoke slow and steady, and listened to the camp breathe. Some wolves can hear footfalls. Omegas hear the quiet between them. A boy came just after moonrise, no older than 14 winters, hair in his eyes and grief in his mouth. I heard there was a place to talk, he said. My father is Alpha. He says an Omega son is ashamed to be hidden. The old ache rose in me, the cellar, the sackcloth, the stay Mira. I swallowed it and patted the rug. Sit. Tell me your name. Rook, he said, flushing. Like the bird. Like the chess piece, I said, and his head jerked up, surprised into a smile. He told me about a house where love bent under tradition until it cracked. He told me he could scent a quarrel 10 minutes before voices rose, and how he used it to get his little sister out of range. You are not something to fix, I said quietly. You are a gift that requires your pack to grow larger around you. He wiped his cheeks as if tears might make him fail some test. Will the king say that to my father? If he does, will your father hear it? I asked gently. Rook's silence answered for him. Then I will, I said. And Bryn. And Elder Mara, who keeps ledgers of grain and of stubbornness. We will say it so many ways the man will trip over it whichever way he turns. He laughed wetly. You sound like a queen. I'm learning, I said, and the words settled in my bones like a truth they had been waiting to hold. The night stretched. Far across the field, an owl called once and then again. Footsteps approached with the cadence I already knew how to breathe with. Cale ducked through the canvas, eyes wolf bright, snow melting on his shoulders. Your brow tells me you didn't die, Bryn said from behind him, which translated to good work, pup. Gabriel followed, carrying a small chest and satisfaction tidy as his handwriting. Storehouse emptied, he reported. Poisoners arrested. 2 of Vesper's men tried to run. 1 sang loud enough to rattle canvas pegs. Cale opened the chest. Inside lay seals, letters, tallies, the paper bones of a plot. He closed it and set his palm on the lid as if to keep the damage contained. Then he looked at me, and the storm in his eyes gentled. You held the hearth, he said. How many came? Enough, I said. And one who needed the king to say the word gift aloud. Cale nodded once, as if I'd confirmed something he had been hoping to be true. At dawn, he said, we show the Northlands what an alpha does when poison touches his queen. I met his gaze and did not look away. And what an omega does when fury touches her king. Dawn broke like flint struck on steel. Frost made lace on every rope. The assembly circle filled with breath cloud and boot scrape and the weight of waiting. Cale stood bareheaded under the thin sun, not hiding the weariness lining his mouth or the iron in his spine. Vesper watched with a hunter's stillness. Cassia wore winter as a veil. Waymeet holds because we believe the same things must be true in every tent, Cale said, voice carrying without shout. Bread is paid for. Gifts are accounted. No one salts another's cup. Gabriel opened the chest. Elder Mara took out letters and read in that steady glacier voice, dates, payments, names braided into a rope strong enough to haul a lie into air. Bryn laid the vials on a tray one by one until the sound of glass on wood was a metronome for outrage. The trader Corin spoke, shoulders squared like a man trying on a new back. He did not beg. He told what he had seen. Vesper's mouth curled. Fabrications, he said. A border alpha accustomed to snowdrifts mistakes for mountains. A frightened merchant told what to say. Bring the poisoners, Mara ordered. They came under guard, hands bound, lips cracked with fear. One spat at Kale's feet and demanded human law. Another stared straight at Kasha as if asking forgiveness for failing her. The third, small, fox-eyed, broke under silence faster than he would have under questioning. Crow and crown, he whispered. The mark was in the wax. The circle's sound changed. Not louder, deeper. Wolves make a different kind of quiet when a truth finally stops pretending to be anything else. Southern March, Kale said, and when he used the title instead of the man's name, winter truly arrived. I claim violation of Waymeet. I claim assault on the Queen under my protection. I claim breach of oath to the Northlands. His eyes went silver at the rims. The Alpha King stood on the edge of shift. Kasha moved like silk sliding off a blade. You mistake zeal for a daughter's ambition, she said sweetly. If a mark appeared, a clerk erred. If a vial traveled, a guard miscounted. My father would not. Your father would, I said. The words left me before I weighed them. Because you would. Because you told a merchant that no one weeps for an omega. She turned her gaze on me, contempt and calculation twin fires. No one will, once you have been replaced. My bond is not a ribbon to be cut when a sharper color arrives, I said. My voice didn't rise, it went down, into the ground the assembly stood on. An alpha who cannot accept that belongs to smaller halls. The crowd moved again, the trickle of weight that becomes a river. I felt where loyalties shifted. The Cliffpax alpha, previously amused, set his jaw. Red Veil's russet cloak pivoted half a degree toward Kale's side. The young alpha with the trembling hands stood taller. Under Waymeet law, Mara declared. Punishment for poison is threefold: confession, restitution, banishment, or binding. Her gaze swept the circle. Vesper of the Southern Marches, will you answer to the charges? Vesper smiled his favorite winter smile. No. Then the law answers for you, Mara said. Southern Marches lose trade priority for a year and a day. Escorts will search your caravans at every pass. If one vial is found, I will take your banners down with my own hands. Kale's voice came last, and it was not loud and not soft. It was the thing in between that makes wolves put their heads down and listen. Step out of my shadow, he said to Vesper, and step very carefully back to your own. He turned to me then, not for approval and not for praise, but to share the weight while it was still hot. I stepped to his side, shoulder to shoulder, Omega to Alpha, Queen to King, and I felt the Northlands move, subtle, inevitable. As if a great beast had finally settled into the right shape for its bones. Together, he murmured, and the word rang like iron struck clean. In the days after Waymeet, the Northlands breathed differently. Word of the exposed plot traveled faster than any courier. Mountain winds carried it, passing from Ridgepack to Riverclan to the human settlements tucked beneath the frost line. Omegas stepped into sunlight with their shoulders a fraction straighter. Alphas learned to pause before assuming silence meant weakness. And Kale, Alpha King, did not retreat behind stone walls to lick political wounds. He walked openly through Winterkeep, letting the kingdom see his eyes still clear, his queen at his side. I spent mornings in council chambers, no longer tucked behind Kale, but seated at the right of Elder Mara, quill in hand, voice counted among those who shaped decisions. At first the veterans of court politics tested me with smiles sharp as fishhooks. But I learned to read the currents beneath their words. When they attempted to use my Omega softness as a lever, I turned it into a fulcrum. Soft metals bend, I said once, cutting through a circular argument on border patrol rotations. But they don't break. That's why they're used to seal cracks. Silence followed, and then, to my shock, nods. Afternoons I walked the city with Bryn. Markets brimmed with gossip as much as goods. Mothers pressed baked rolls into my hands, children presented drawings of wolves with crowns, and the blacksmith's Omega son, Rook, shyly told me his father had asked him to teach the alpha pups how to read a pack's emotional scent. He said it was a skill warriors should have, Rook whispered. He never would have said that before we meet. At night, Kale and I returned to the study where we first spoke. Sometimes we debated policy, sometimes we simply existed in unguarded quiet. There were still boundaries, carefully honored, mutually held, but closeness grew like ivy through stone cracks. One evening, while reviewing new agreements written to protect Omega rights in every pack, Kale paused, pen lowered. "Do you ever miss Frost Hollow?" he asked. I thought of lavender-scented cellars and my mother's trembling hands. "I miss the idea of home," I said. "But I think I'm finally building one that fits." His gaze softened, not the king's gaze, not the alpha's, but Kale's, the man who had once said he needed someone who would not fear the wolf or the crown. "Good," he said. "Because the Northlands are already starting to shape themselves around you. I'd rather not have to chase you across the mountains to bring you back." "You'd send wolves?" "I'd come myself," he murmured, and a warmth curled low inside me that had nothing to do with the fire. Winter deepened early that year, as if the mountains wished to test the new balance forming in their halls. Storms bruised the sky purple, wind sobbed through the arrow slits, snow came thick enough to swallow the training yard overnight. In that hush, trouble found a new crack. It arrived as a whisper, small packs along the southern border turning restless, some refusing to accept a queen who was not born into one of the great lines. "They claim your blood is too thin to steady the Northlands," Gabriel said, spreading reports across the council table. "A handful of alphas test the air for rebellion, not open challenge, but erosion. Erosion kills cliffs more surely than a single blow. I knew that from Frost Hollow." "What do they fear?" I asked. Mara's gaze flicked to Kale, then to me. "Change," she said simply. "You threaten the shape they built their comfort on." Kale braced both hands on the table. "We'll ride south after the thaw. Speak with each pack. Make clear that unity is not optional." "No," I said before thinking. All heads turned. "Not yet. If we ride now, it becomes a show of force. Fear only hardens against that. Let me meet them first, Omega to pack, not queen to subject." Kale's jaw tightened, the wolf in him balked. "Not without protection." "I won't go alone," I assured. "Bryn can grind 10 alphas into dust with one glare. And Gabriel reads loyalty like runes. Let me try the soft path first. If I fail, the hard one will still be there." Silence stretched, then, to my astonishment, Elder Mara nodded. "The girl is right, Kale. Force secures obedience, not loyalty. Let us see if her way works." Kale's eyes met mine, silver shades pulsing at the edges. "If harm touches you, you'll tear down mountains," I finished gently. "I know. But you won't need to." The plan took shape, a southern circuit through 5 small packs and 3 border villages. We left at first melt, hooves splashing through slush, winter releasing the land like a slow exhale. The air smelled of thaw and pine sap. In the first village, suspicion hung thicker than chimney soot. The elders invited me into their circle but spoke around me, not to me. Bryn bristled. Gabriel watched. I breathed. Instead of demanding respect, I listened, truly listened, to their fears, that an Omega Queen would soften the Northlands, that Kale would bend to my will, that Omegas might forget their place and destabilize pack order. When they finished, I said only, "If your pack broke a leg, would you splint it or run it harder? Strength isn't lost when you protect the injured part, it keeps the whole body moving." Something in their eyes shifted. Small shifts, but shifts all the same. Not all southern halls were so willing to hear. By the 4th stop, winter had crept back enough to frost the eaves, and the Alpha of Stonebar Den met us with courtesy carved from granite. He allowed me into his hall, but his wolves watched me as if expecting me to crumble into ash. "Omega Queens," he said with a polite smile that didn't touch his eyes, Make fine ornaments. But the Northlands need a spine of iron, not silk. I could have answered the insult directly. Instead, I turned to the oldest wolf in the hall, a gray-furred grandmother mending a tear in a child's cloak. What stitch do you use to stop the cloth from pulling apart? I asked. She looked up, surprised. Running back stitch, she said. Strongest hold. And what thread? She lifted the spool. Soft wool, so the seam has give. Hard thread snaps when pulled. I smiled. Even fabric needs softness to survive tension. Packs are no different. A murmur went through the hall, quiet, thoughtful. The alpha's jaw worked as he re-evaluated me. He did not apologize, but when we left, he walked us to the gates himself. You have teeth, he admitted. Soft-voiced, but sharp. Bryn grinned once we were out of earshot. I'm keeping that healer with the cloak. She has better politics than half the council. By the time we reached the final stop, a small cliffside hamlet clinging to rock like a stubborn root, the wind howled loud enough to steal words. We sought shelter in the only longhouse. Inside, the pack waited tense. A young alpha stood at the center, chin high with pride that trembled if he looked too closely. You come to teach us how to run our houses? He challenged. No, I said simply. Only to ask one question. That disarmed him more than any speech. What question? Do you believe the strength of your pack comes from fear or from trust? He stared. Fear keeps order. Fear cracks under weight. I countered. Trust holds even when storms come. I gestured around us. This house stands because each beam leans on the others. Remove one, and the storm takes all. The alpha swallowed, gaze darting to the wolves around him. The house did creak, wind battering the walls, and the simile hit home. Something inside him sagged, not in defeat, but in realization. When we departed, his second pressed a woven bracelet into my hand, simple wool, dyed with cliff flowers. For steadiness, she said. The trip back to Winterkeep felt lighter. Snow glittered under sun. Ravens followed us like gossiping heralds. Gabriel rode ahead, Bryn behind. I let the quiet settle. We had done what force could not, planted seeds. Seeds need time to root. I prayed the Northlands would give them that time. Winterkeep greeted us with banners snapping in a bright wind, the keep alive with movement. Wolves on the walls raised a welcoming howl, not formal, not ceremonial, but joyous. Kale was waiting in the courtyard, without crown or mantle, as if he had come down the moment the scouts announced our approach. The sight of him, steady, unguarded, hit me with a strange, fierce warmth. Not longing. Not relief. Recognition. He closed the distance in a few strides, stopping just short of touching. No blood, he noted, voice low. No war, I returned. His breath left him in something close to a laugh. You did it. We began it, I corrected. The rest must grow. He studied me for a long moment. You carry the Northlands differently now. I think, I said slowly, the Northlands carry me too. We walked through the keep together, through halls where wolves dipped their heads not in deference to a crown but in respect earned. Elder Merrim met us at the inner gate. Word travels, she said. Faster than ravens. The south bends, not broken, but bending. Enough. That night, Kale and I returned to the moonlit balcony where he had first promised partnership rather than possession. Snow drifted soft as breath. The kingdom lay below like a sleeping wolf, powerful even in rest. So, he said, leaning on the stone beside me, do you still fear the cage? I looked at the mountains, then at him, wolf and man, crown and heart. Both offered openly. There was never a cage, I said. Only a door I needed to learn how to walk through. He exhaled slowly. And now? No, I said, sliding my hand into his without hesitation. I choose to stay on the other side of that door, with you. His fingers closed around mine, not claiming, but anchoring. A vow made without ceremony, yet more binding than any cord of silver and gold. No hiding? He murmured. Never again. Above us, the moon climbed, full, bright, ancient witness to every choosing before ours and every future one we had changed. Wolves howled across the snow's cape, not for ceremony, but for hope. The king turned to me fully then, eyes both man-warm and wolf-bright. Together, Mira? Together, Kale. And so the Northlands began a new chapter, one not ruled by fear or rigid tradition, but shaped by an Alpha who learned to share his throne, and an Omega who learned she had never been meant to kneel. Not a cage. A partnership. A kingdom remade by two hearts that refused to hide from each other.